Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Energy Officer Show. I'm your host, Graham Parr, and I'm here with my co-host, Graham Betchart.
What's up, Grant? Great to be here, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Conscious Energy Officer Show. This is how this show works. Every week we get together and we're going to bring up a pressure point that police officers go through. And we're going to walk you through some mental skills on how to work through those pressure points. And our intention is to help police officers and help create that bridge from the community to the police officer and create that connection that we want. And on top of that pressure point, we're also going to have a connection story, a community connection story that's going to be built on every week. And that's that incredible work of the officers building connection in the community. And we're lucky enough on our show, we have John Costanzo with us. So John, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Hey, thanks, Graham. I'm doing great.
Let everyone know who you are, what you do, man.
Yeah, I'm John Costanzo, and I'm a police officer in Washington, D.C. of 14 years. So I wanted to, jump right into it with our, community connection story. And our pressure point piggybacks off of it. So it's kind of great. So we're going to start with feelings part 2. So last week we got into feelings, and then this is feelings part 2. And part 2, the importance of that is when you interact with somebody, they might be in fear. So how do you connect with them and diffuse that fear? So that's what we're going to get into. And so it all starts at Union Station. There was a homeless man. We'll call him Calvin. Don't want to use his real name, but so Calvin was aggressively panhandling. So he went up to this lady when I initially saw him, and he was, aggressively asking for money in her face. And that's definitely a crime in the district. But I wanted to connect with Calvin. So, I went up to him. I was like, hey, how's it going? And, he instantly saw me, and I sensed that he was in fear because he got very defensive. He raised his voice. He started yelling. He got angry. And I was like, whoa, initially, whoa, he's coming in hot. So, I just, at that point, I did my best to connect with him. I started with the first skill, what's important now, controlling what I can. I can't control his response, but I can control my own. So I came in with palms down energy, as we talked about in previous episodes. So I came in cool. Initially, I felt the feeling of, whoa, what is going on here? Like, oh man, like he's coming in hot, and I didn't even do anything. So I'm like, okay, that's potentially fear, right?
Yeah.
So I just did my best to connect with him and just controlled what I could, stayed in the present moment, tried to understand where he was coming from. And he ended up just like blowing me off and saying, whatever. And so I was like, all right, that didn't go as I was hoping it would go. That was probably my initial feelings that came up was, I guess, rejection.
Okay.
And so I did. I felt rejected by him. And, knowing me as an officer, I come in cool, calm, and try to connect, right? Cool, calm, and connect. And so I was like, all right, let me give him space. So I walk away. He wasn't aggressively panhandling anymore. So he got the point, right? And he ends up walking away as well. So in my head, initially, I felt that rejection. And then I went to this skill, you versus you, right? So I gave Calvin the power, which is where I think that rejection came from. So I was giving him that power, which made me feel that way. And so what I did was I took back that power, right? I was in the right to, acknowledge him and acknowledge what he was doing was not okay. Because the lady felt very uncomfortable. And my job is to keep the peace, right? And I could just see it on her face. She did not, she did not feel good in that moment. So that's why I tried to connect with Calvin. So at that point, I got myself back under control. And then I was like, you know what? Hey, he stopped aggressively panhandling, even though it didn't go exactly how I wanted it to go. I wasn't focused on the outcome, right?
Wow.
So the very next day, I came back and I went to Calvin and I said, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
He goes, I'm not doing anything wrong. And he got like defensive again. I was like, oh, it's okay, bro. Like, I'm just asking how you're doing. Are you having a good day? How did you sleep? Because I knew he was homeless.
Right.
How did you sleep? Instantly brought him down and disarmed that initial fear of I'm in trouble, right? That initial fear of he's out to get me. Because I wasn't. I just wanted to check on Calvin because I care about Calvin, right? And so that's the beginning of the story. And you know, as the episodes go on, I know we only have 30 minutes, so we'll start there, and then I'll pass it off to you guys.
But that's an incredible start. There's a couple things I want to talk about. First of all, great job. Building connection in the community is profound. I think that's the foundation for creating peace in a community, is building trust and connection with who you're working with. And incredible of you to go in there and want to build trust, right? Great intentions. You come in there, you're connecting, and then wham, like just rejected. You know what I mean? Like you're doing all this cool mental stuff. I'm focusing what I can't control. I'm calm and cool. I'm palms down, choosing my response. And then shit, feeling rejected comes up. And oh, we all know what that feels like. That's a big moment right there, John, with all those feelings. When that comes up, when I feel rejected, I feel hurt. I can get angry, right? I can get defensive in those moments. You know, hey, no, so talk us through that, man, because that is so powerful. You got hit with that. And instead of just reacting with feeling rejected, which could come off as anger or force,
right?
You didn't. How are you working through that moment? That's heightened right there, right? Am I reading this correct? Or?
No, absolutely. Oh yeah. I mean, he got very excited, and you know, I just paused. I held that space and I just listened.
Okay.
And I was choosing my response. I was, you know, as long as I'm not in danger, and I told myself, you're not in danger, right? He's not going to hurt you. Hold your space. You didn't come in hot. You came in cool and calm. Just hold your space. Don't get defensive. Just listen. See what he's got to say. And what I've found is when you come in with power and love and compassion, right? Those beautiful words. When you come in with that, when somebody comes in from the dark side and the negative and the force, what I found is the force can't hang out with the power.
That's right.
And so after he went off and I just held my ground and I really didn't say much, I gave him the microphone, you know, and I just listened. He said what he said, and then he walked away. And so that was my response was just silence. And I just listened.
Wow. John, I can't tell you how, and then Grant, I know Grant has a bunch of stuff to say, but it's so stimulating what you're doing here in that moment to choose your response. And when we talk about, just for everyone listening, the difference between power and force, real basics, force would be you're using anger, fear, pride, right? You're operating from those spaces. You're forcing it, right? Power would be compassion, neutrality, willingness, love, like a different dimension. So what I'm hearing from you, when you stepped into power, I'm sure when you felt rejected, right? You felt some anger, some frustration, maybe even your pride kicking in, like, hey, you know, and that can be a time when people try to use force, and yet you went to listening. You owned your feelings, didn't push them away. You said, no, I'm feeling this. And then told yourself to choose your response and created space by listening. John, in Grant and I's world, right, the performance coaching, that is textbook high-level leadership in that moment. Grant, what do you think, man? I mean, is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, when you instantly, because I've been in many, especially in this role as a mental performance coach, I've been in a lot of situations where I've been rejected. I felt rejected. Soon as you actually wear that, you actually you could get out of focus. But if you do this work, if you know how to take care of your energy, you do a lot of breath work, you in the midst of adversity, rejection, you can still feel a little shitty and still have space to move. A lot of times when we don't have space, we don't hold the space and we feel rejected, then we tend to actually react and not respond.
Mm.
But if we take care of this space, it gives us space to play with the rejection, to play with a little bit of feeling like shit in the moment, but you can still move around because you held the space and you've done this work enough to know that I can still fuck up and still move around and be fluid.
Mm. And this is advanced. It's very advanced. Remember, we have 16 principles, but as you get to principle 14, it's called breathe and be. And John, you were doing that at a high level, right? The feelings come in, it hits. You feel the need to react, right? Or to act on that, right? It's there. And yet you pause, you choose your response, right? You were doing palms down, and then you just breathe and do nothing. And I know that sounds crazy. And we call that breathing and being. So you breathe and you just be. And as Grant mentioned, that's called creating space.
Mm-hmm.
If you had attacked Calvin, I'm just saying energetically attacked him with like commands or force, that would be not creating space. So really, I'm just like, man, that's such a big moment right there. I think not only police officers, we can all relate to being rejected, but man, as an officer, you must face that all the time. That's my guess, is that like you're sharing a story with Calvin, but you must experience that a lot.
During my career, it hasn't come up too much because I've always tried to come in from a place of caring and just asking questions instead of telling people what to do.
Mm.
So, but when it does come up, I definitely feel those feelings.
Yeah.
And so that's when you have to fall back on your skills. And so, yes, it's definitely, you feel it for sure. And you really do. You have to, if you don't have a palms down response, it's best to just, breathe and just be there. Right. Because what did I do? I didn't do anything. I came in asking if he's okay.
Oh,
That's not.
that's a big one, John. That like not to cut off, when you're in that moment, you come into a space, maybe you've never met someone before you're interacting with, and then they're projecting all of this stuff onto you, right? They're projecting maybe I'm afraid of a cop, or this cop is coming up and wants to do some sort of harm to me, or is looking for me doing something wrong. That processing in that moment, right? Where the projection of someone coming to you and you've never met them before, that's another big moment to create space and kind of really be aware of like your initial reaction. I mean, that's got to be something that's a big moment, is it not?
Oh, it's really big because these initial interactions with somebody, what I've noticed is it's like the foundation of that relationship.
Okay.
How you come in, building that trust. You meet somebody brand new, are you going to trust them right away? Probably not. You shouldn't. You should build over time, right? Just like vulnerability. You don't just go tell somebody all of your deepest, darkest secrets that you don't trust, right?
Right.
So knowing Calvin, he's a homeless man. I don't know what he's going through. Clearly, he's going through something. So that initial interaction is so important. And so taking that extra time to understand them, connect with them, listen in the beginning is so huge because it builds that trust pretty quickly. I mean, it happened pretty quickly.
Yeah. I would assume that in your, I mean, this is actually in anything, but in your role as a police officer, to build trust and that connection is all in your tone, right? So, and that tone has so much energy in it. And so if you're dealing with, someone that's being erratic, or you're dealing with your own shit, like being rejected, how do you still stay so present to keep the tone still at that level where they still feel connected? Because I know I've been challenged a lot of times where, because I kept my tone, even though I was pissed off, frustrated, or scared, or there was some kind of external environment thing coming at me, but I still kept my tone. If I lost my tone, then everything just goes to shit.
Yeah.
So I can only, and when you come up with a badge, instantly people are like, "What did I do wrong?" Like Calvin said. So how do I trust you, man? I think it's all within your tone.
Mm.
Uh,
The tone is extremely important, but so is body language.
yeah,
Mm.
If I'm like this, like
Right.
this, right, arms crossed. For anyone just listening and can't see, my arms are crossed. This is a defensive position, right? So
right,
if I'm like, "Hey, Calvin, how's it going? You doing okay?" This means I'm defensive, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's not expressing.
Yeah.
Trust.
That's projecting a whole lot of things, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So body positioning, tone, the way I use my hands a lot. I'm Italian, we use our hands a lot. All those are extremely important. Some cops come up and they have their hand on their gun right away,
Oh,
oh,
right?
wow.
But I mean, it's an easy. My gun is normally a little lower. It's below my hip, so I have a drop down holster. So my
Yeah,
hand is it's easy to rest it there. But coming from the other side of it, if somebody is just afraid of cops or they had a terrible experience, they could be like, "Whoa, why is his hand on his gun?"
yeah,
I mean, so you like all those things are super important. Your tone could come off great, but your body position could be terrible. When you go interact with somebody,
yeah.
are you trapping them in a corner? Are you giving them space to move?
Mm.
Why
right.
not? Why not give him space to move? Because I've interacted with another homeless individual that was sleeping, and he was sleeping in between the escalators. And then I walked up to him, but then there was nowhere for him to go.
Mm,
So he got instantly aggressive. So I instantly backed up because then I thought, oh, wait a minute. I'm not giving him an exit here. I didn't do it intentionally, but I should back up and give
Wow.
him an exit. Right. So I backed up and I gave him space. And then he ended up leaving. And then that was okay. Right.
Mm.
there it is, dude.
So
Just
it,
going back
a
to
lot
what
of it's just that ego. It's that ego work. You got to dissolve your ego.
oh,
And that's skill number 5.
ooh,
Dissolving me and evolving the we. So I call that the servant leader.
there it is. It's
That's
almost
a
like
that's a big one.
when you're approaching, you're in service to who you're working with, and it's almost like if I'm hearing correctly, the first part of being in control of a situation, of course, is being in control of yourself,
Yep.
and then my tone, my energy, my body language. I mean, conscious energy officer, right? That's the name of this whole thing, is being aware of what energy am I projecting onto this situation. And is that going to endanger the situation? Is that going to make it a more peaceful situation? And that does seem like a big one. I mean, even if I know I've done something wrong and I look over and someone's got their hand on a gun, I'm like, my first thing is, why is your hand on a gun?
Right.
Because if
Yeah.
you're on a gun, that must mean you're looking at me like potentially you need a gun, or else your
Right.
hand wouldn't be on a gun. So that means we're in a heightened situation right off the bat.
Right.
Right.
But
So
as an officer, not to
yeah,
break your thought, but
well,
as an officer, when your hand's on your gun, for me, it just means I'm on my feet a lot, right? So I'm gonna try to get the most comfortable position. With cops, you'll have your hands up on your vest, or one on the gun, one on the vest. Because for me, that's a comfortable position. So
totally
like that's the cop's perspective of it's not that you're in danger. But I could see how someone would think, well, why is his hand on his gun?
right.
I'm in fear. So it's our job to disarm that fear. And this is how we do it.
It makes such sense when I'm doing mental coaching with like teams, or you're sitting on the side of a practice or something. There's just a tendency to just do this shit all the time.
Yeah.
Like, close your fucking arms, because literally it's more comfortable. If you hang your arms by your side for hours, your fucking hands get heavy. All the blood, it's like the weirdest thing. And so you just start doing shit like this. And then I look around and I go, oh, I'm closed off. I look like an asshole right now, just like pissed off. I'm an asshole. And really, I'm just fucking tired.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you just broke it down. You're like, it's not that we're thinking there's danger. Just resting my hand on my gun is a place to rest my hand. And then resting, you said on your vest. Was that the other hand? Like,
your vest. There's like the vest cut out, and then you can like hold up here to like give your arms a break.
So that makes sense. Almost like that first approach. It seems like, if we're doing like what's important now and how do we want to be in the present, it's like, hey, if I approach this with my hand off my gun, and I approach, like you mentioned, somehow gentle hands, maybe it is palms down, or someone sees my hands, very caring situation. Maybe that starts the de-escalation process already. And then it goes away from this general misunderstanding that your hand's not on your gun because I'm a threat. You're just tired. John, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I didn't know. So I'm guessing there's a lot of people that don't know that,
Right. And that's why we're doing this, right? Because we want to build that bond. This is not only for police officers. This is for everybody, right? Anybody can use these skills any day of the week.
That's right. That's right.
And that's why it's important to understand each other. Because if you can understand me and I can understand you, then right away, that energy that's high is now starting a little lower. And that's a great start. If we could save one life, we already won.
Totally.
It's like that. And I never thought this was the case, but compassion is one of the most incredible traits in high pressure situation.
Oh yeah.
First, you'd be like, compassion, that sounds soft. That sounds like we're going to get hurt in a high pressure situation. Like, compassion, you're full of shit. But I actually took compassion and I look at it in these super intense moments. In compassion, it's amazing what it does. It's amazing how it allows you to perform under pressure in incredible ways. Just having compassion, for example, you're pulling up on scene, having compassion for everyone on the scene, already you're de-escalating the situation.
Yeah.
Sports, having compassion for a referee or an umpire, which is usually what everyone blames as like the big enemy. Just having compassion for them, it's amazing how that helps your presence be more powerful. And now we're not stuck in anger and frustration. So I like to use the word competitive compassion to give it a little bit of juice. Like, hey, let's compete to use compassion in these moments that normally we would never use fucking compassion, because it sounds like some soft shit that doesn't have any business, with police officers or professional athletes. Sounds like some soft shit. Turns out it's not soft at all.
Right.
Turns out competitive compassion is high level shit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't show that level of compassion, you're not going to be at your best. And now if we're talking about competing or actually, having success, we're not going to have as much success. So, John, when I say the word compassion, what does that come up for you? And like, take us through the mind of your average police officer, and we say the word compassion, and what that might bring up,
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know, because I've been doing this work for a while.
All on you, but
you say compassion. I love compassion. I love love. You know what I mean? And you say love, and people, they get turned away. I think love is the most compassion. They're similar, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the most powerful word for me, is just to love everybody, right? If you love everybody, where are you going wrong?
Yeah.
Right. So for an officer, I mean, it just depends. It depends about their ego, how they feel about themselves, if they have insecurities. I mean, we all do to a degree.
Yeah.
It just depends on all those factors. So initially, I guess before I started this work a long time ago, I don't know, if you were to say compassion, I think my insecurities would come out as a man,
Right.
So,
awesome.
But no, now I love it. I mean,
but
when somebody says that's soft, I say, okay, cool. Like,
we see you as a leader in this space, and we've been in the mental health space. I've been in here for decades. there was really big stigmas against this stuff. 20 years ago for sure. The last couple of years, a lot of this has shifted. People have really opened up. Some of the challenge I would find is sometimes with some of the folks that maybe had never even, the word compassion was so against anything they've ever thought was it, that maybe sometimes we would get stuck in our old belief systems. And I've noticed that can kind of keep us stuck a little bit. Like for me, I didn't think compassion was a good thing. I thought that was soft. And I had to face belief systems inside of me that were like, you're not allowed to have compassion, Graham. As a male, you're not allowed to feel vulnerable. And then as I would listen to that belief system, I would feel worse and worse in life. I'll be like, well, I'm doing what it says, but I feel like shit. Like this is awful in life. And so that's what got me into the mental training in 1997 was I was like, that doesn't work. So when I asked for help and had compassion for myself because I was suffering and then learned the power of vulnerability, I said, holy shit, like this stuff is through the roof. But then I went to go teach it to sports. And sometimes some of the other coaches were like, no, we don't like this. So some of the challenge sometimes is maybe you're learning this stuff and maybe the culture you're in or the community you're in or the family you come from, or maybe generational has been like, this isn't it. So that can be a challenge sometimes, right? Bringing, like, you might be like, hey, this is a beautiful thing. I love love and compassion. Perhaps maybe you're working with people sometimes that are like, I don't really feel that vibe.
Exactly. It's funny you say that. I got a quick story, on that. That happens a lot. Practicing these skills, using these skills every day. Some officers will come in with, and I'm not bad mouthing anybody, but just trying to control, right? Yeah. This is common. The average human being that doesn't know or practice these skills tries to control. They try to control their lives. They try to control other people. They try to control their kids. To a degree, we know that's not possible, right? What's important now, what you can control. So I will have officers show up because I am like the pioneer of this in law enforcement, and they will try to take control, and I'll have to, it's okay, palms down. Yeah. It's okay. We got this. So you're right. Yes. And they'll say things, like, I know what you were trying to do there. You're trying to change that person, but I'm not. I'm really not. I'm not trying to change that person. I'm just keeping the peace. I'm getting the information that I need for my documentation, making sure everybody's safe, keeping the peace. I'm building a connection. So the next time, in hopes for the next time that I interact with that individual, it goes a lot smoother than when it first started.
That's right. Man, well done, man. Well done, John. I know for me, been doing this work for a while, that's something that I face quite often is going into spaces, maybe introducing some of these skills. Could be to a business. One of my hardest ones was with Navy admirals. I was working with Navy admirals, right? Running carrier strike groups, 9,000 sailors, nuclear subs. I think the U.S., we have like 14 of them. It's our most lethal thing we have is a carrier strike group. Like, you don't want a carrier strike group pulling up on you. If they're pulling up, like, it's business, and they are projecting power and they're visually intimidating. And that's what it's for. And I had to go to the admirals and I was talking to them about compassion and vulnerability. And we were on a phone call. I couldn't see him, but I knew they were doing this. They were like, fuck that shit. Who the fuck is this guy talking about vulnerability? And then in a moment I had to say, well, are you tougher if you're willing to feel vulnerable, or are you tougher if you avoid vulnerability? And I just had to sit and pause, and they paused. Not that I had it, but they knew. They were like, you're tougher if you go experience vulnerability. And I was like, well, there you go. So for me to call you guys tough guys and respect you on that level, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. This isn't for everybody. And I understand that. So I had to have the courage to go say that to Navy admirals, which was terrifying to me, right? But at the same time, I had to. So I had to go, but I did it with compassion, with love. I gave them space. If they didn't want to be a part of it, it's okay. They did want to be a part of it. And they appreciated me coming with that level of compassion and vulnerability. And then after that, they started to kind of have some fun with vulnerability. And I was asking them to do certain things that felt vulnerable, and they ended up loving it. And they built connection with their sailors. And to keep it real, right, the Navy has a big problem with suicide, right? And this is also a big problem with police officers, right? So that's what we were going for, is working on that. And I said, hey, if you guys are willing to be vulnerable with the folks you lead, guess what? They're going to be willing to be vulnerable back. They're going to be willing to say, like, hey, I need help. I'm struggling. I'm thinking about, right? And we can start to work on it. So yeah, I have to have compassion for myself to go try to live these skills and teach them to people, like you, John, or other officers or Navy admirals, where I'm like, I'm not in your shoes, and I'm not saying I am, but at the same time, I have to deliver the goods here, because like me and Grant we know this shit works, right? So we know this works, and we also know maybe there's some old stereotypes. And the Navy admirals were like, we don't fucking get vulnerable. And I was like, I got it. But at the same time, we're going to have to learn how to do that.
Right.
So
my question is, was their hand on the nuke in that conversation?
Oh, shit.
Right.
Then I would be in fear.
Yeah.
What's your address?
Yeah. Really great experience after that, to live in vulnerability, right? And to be a conscious energy officer, to lead in that space. And then a couple months later, you feel the connection really deepen, So now me and that admiral, there's like a real connection there, and it was like we both had to live in a vulnerable space to find it. And just a heads up, we've already flown through a half hour. So crazy how fast this show goes by. John, way to pick up on our community connection story, man, and get us going on that. Not sure if we even got to specifically saying our pressure point was feelings, but I think we talked about that a good amount today.
We did.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
That. Okay.
Yep. So, and then it's funny you talked about vulnerability, because the next episode we're going to get into vulnerability.
Well, there we go. And that's
perfect.
Perfect segue into the next episode. So thanks for joining another Conscious Energy Officer episode. Superstar mental coach Grant Parr, superstar officer and mental coach John Costanzo, and me, I'm Graham Betchard here coaching, and we're sharing this. Thank you for showing up, and we look forward to helping out more. And thank you all officers for all the great work you're doing out there. So grateful for it.
So great.
Opening up to this. Grateful.
So grateful.
Stay present.